bibliography with like 230 odd citations in it. You can actually see a whole lot more. I just posted up on the website. Basically every behind the scenes thing I've ever done, every concept art sketch, every in progress sketch, all of the reference imagery, and time-lapse video for the making of almost every entry in here. Normally that's sort of like a Kickstarter, Patreon type reward, but everybody who has the book gets a free month to just browse through as much of that as you want. So you can see it's been a lot of work. And it's been terrifying. Like I've not had a salary really in 2.5 years, and have just been sort of coasting off of savings and the advance from this book. And I didn't know how it was going to land. I didn't know a lot of things about how this book was going to turn out. I didn't know what the page size was. I didn't know what the page count was. I didn't know how many chapters there were going to be. Like I didn't know. There were a lot of things I didn't know. I didn't know until I actually opened up the cover, like, and got a physical copy, I didn't know what the cover was going to look like. There's a lot of things that I didn't really get to know about this. But I had faith that people would like it and that it'd be something worth doing. And the fact that you all are here is proof of that. Yeah, it's been a crazy, crazy day. Like I've signed 200 some odd. I don't know, like a lot. At least 200. I've got another like 180, 200 to take home with me. So if I shake your hand, I'll probably do it with my left hand. That's okay. Yeah. And the whole thing was a lark, weirdly enough. Like, people who've known me long enough know that this is not a foregone conclusion, that this is how I was going to end up. I know that Sarah here, I had some arguments when, Sarah's known me for 15 years or so, and we had some arguments over feminism, and I was not necessarily on the right side of history for all of it. It's been a growing process, and even looking at some of the stuff in the book, I'm like, oh, I could have written that better. Oh, I was too hard on Josephine Baker. Oh, this, oh, that. But it's a human piece of work, and try as I might not to be, I'm still a human, for now. So, yeah. I don't know. I can do a reading, the questions. Again, I don't really have plans for this.
I mean, how did you come up with the idea of the book, and you can tell us how long it took you and stuff like that?
So, the idea came out of a lunchtime conversation at DreamWorks, where I used to work, when Frozen came out, and there was a terrible clickbait article going around about how, the Frozen girls were bad role models, and I'm like, no, we can come up with way worse ones. Let's do it. We can do this. We can be the change we want to see in this world. Thank you, Gandhi. And so we started brainstorming, like, what's the worst possible idea for a Disney princess? And so Lolita was the winner of that conversation, although there were plenty of other ones that were just really also awful. But I tossed out, because I'm also an info junkie, I'm like, well, what about, like, Boudica, first century Iceni warrior, burnt down London to the ground and killed 70,000 Romans? Or what about Jingabande, who was mother of Angol and waged guerrilla warfare on the Portuguese from the jungle for 40 years after conquering a tribe of cannibals? My coworkers are like, why do you know that? Which is a valid question. And I just felt like, well, why don't you know that? Everybody should know that. So it was a lark. I had like 4, 5, 6 different projects that I wanted to start after I left DreamWorks, because I knew that being a black humored individual, I was not the best cog for that particular machine, and I needed to leave DreamWorks because I was bringing everybody down, most of all myself. This is the first one that I tried, and I was like, well, if people don't like it, it has the greatest chance of going viral, and we'll see. We'll see real fast. And it went viral really, really fast. And then I just kept going at it, and people started calling me out really early on, because I wasn't very critical in my work. Like the Jingabande entry that I did was mostly sourced off of Wikipedia, which is shameful to think of right now. I'm like, oh god, that was me. And people are like, how dare you uncritically repeat a bunch of racist tropes? And I'm like, what? White guy from Kentucky. But you get better. And I just kept working at it and doing more research and getting more and more interested in it, and here we are. Like the actual process of it took the better part of 2 years. About 7 months of which was waiting for my publisher to get back to me. That was a very painful 7 months. But yeah, the whole thing, I turned in the first draft last September, and there's been edits, and it's basically been locked since earlier this year. But it's crazy, these things keep evolving. Like I was posting up a bunch of behind the scenes content, cut content, stuff that couldn't make the book. Which is weird because there is still like a little bit of space here and there, but they kept changing the page size, and it was really hard to tell, like, can I put more in this entry? I don't know, should I cut it? Should I put this back? Anyway. But it keeps changing. So like, as I'm putting up cut content, there's a woman in here who's a Filipina spy who had leprosy during World War II, worked against the Japanese occupation. And I was able to, there's nothing written on her online that had what happened to her after the war. I was able to track down where she died and how she died. It was, at the time, the only thing that said that. And then literally a month ago, like a month prior to today, someone released a book about her entire life that goes into her later life. So these things keep evolving, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, does that answer the question? Yeah.
What's been really surprising to you in this process? Is there something that just turned out like different, or that you uncovered?
The internet hate engine. The sheer amount of rancor online has been a surprise. Like, it's very weird being a pseudo public figure and having people recognize you, and then waking up half the time to hate mail. And it's not just, like, of course, you get the whole, like, you're a traitor to your gender, like, Men's Rights Association folk. Like, I did an AMA on Reddit yesterday, which was actually wonderful for the most part. And then, like, a day later, all those guys discovered me and started, like, posting this stuff. And it's just, it's great. Like, while you're writing this, who's doing your wife, sort of thing. And I was like, yeah, stay strong, Reddit, stay strong. But it's not just from that. I get it from, like, the left. I got an entry that's in the book about a Native American two-spirit, and for those who are not familiar, two-spirit is sort of analogous to transgender. This person was, the Christian missionaries would only call this person male, but it's female. And so to describe this phenomenon, because it was a very important part of their life and what happened, I used all sorts of different vocabulary, but I consistently got streams and streams and streams of hate mail from Tumblr, basically saying you need to use the phrase assigned male at birth. That is the only phrase that is acceptable. Problem is that it's not technically correct. I tracked down Crow Two Spirits and asked them, like, when is gender assigned? When was gender assigned by the Crow in the 19th century? And they're like, hard to tell. Like, sometimes it's at birth, sometimes it was like at 4 years old, sometimes we never really assign gender, they just figure it out. I'm like, then what do you use? And like, the longer it stayed up, the more hate mail I got. So learning to deal with that and figuring out how to talk to people and be a person online and be human and still look after yourself has been the most surprising and most difficult part of the whole process, for sure. Yeah.
Which princess surprised you most while you were researching them?
Oh God, which princess surprised me the most? Honestly, I mentioned this, Josephine Baker. And that's the one entry in the book that if I could rewrite, I probably would. I read a biography of her that's 600 pages long. That's not, and it's like tiny type, like it is a thick book that's goes into as much detail as I think is humanly possible on her life. Like, I don't think there's a single person that they did not talk to. It was written by one of her kids. I went in expecting to love Josephine Baker because she's rad. Like, she overcame the most horrible upbringing, sexual abuse, like incredible racism, and then became like Michael Jackson and Angelina Jolie and Madonna rolled into 1 times 10. Like there is no one who has ever been as big a star comparable to my mind. And she was getting carried around in a carriage pulled by an ostrich in Hungary. Like, there's photos of this. That's amazing, right? But you read through 600 pages of this, and it goes through like all the people that she interacted with, and she burned a lot of people, like a lot of people, and it's just 600 pages of just time and time and time and time and time and time and time again. And it was really hard to sympathize with her by the end of it. So the entry is probably overly critical of her, because I didn't take the time to like step back and like, okay, here's the larger picture. Like it's in there, but it's not. And I say this, it's on my mind because I'm terrified when people start reading through the book. People love Josephine Baker, and very justly so, that people are going to write me and not be real happy with the entry. It's a human piece of work, and I had a human reaction to her story. Like I think it'd be hard for anybody to read that book and really come out of it like rah Baker. Like, she's a complicated person. So that was the one that surprised me the most.
Sorry, there's two of us. You go first. So it's in the line that you have like this whole list of like 2,000 women. How do you choose which one to do every week?
Lately, it's been I've got a Google Maps interface wherever there's a hole. Like I'm trying to fill in the Google Map. The next one I'm doing is from Chile. The one after that is two, possibly three, depending on how the research goes, Australian women. And then just continue. I've been trying to track down like Siberian indigenous myths. I've been trying to track down any number of very difficult to research places. It's just stuff I haven't done, stuff that nobody really knows much about, like stuff that doesn't get out there. That's really what's drawing me. And then there's the baseline of like, the subject has to have personality, conflict, and agency. Like if it doesn't have personality, it's okay. You've got conflict and agency, but no personality. It's kind of boring. If you don't have agency, it's a tragedy, and if you don't have conflict, it's a resume. So you need sort of all three for it to be an interesting story. Yeah. And then Brittany, did you have a?
Yeah. Is there a character that you identify with? Is there any of them that like?
Noor Inayat Khan. The character I most identify with is Noor Inayat Khan, who's on the website in the book. For those of you who don't know, she was this honest-to-God Indian princess who was like an airhead, a klutz. She was like a children's book author and like played music and was a Sufi mystic pacifist. Like she was just an oddball. She was a super odd duck. And like the least likely person to ever get involved in a war. And yet, when the Nazis invaded Paris, she dropped everything and joined with the British, whom she hated. She went in the interview, was like, just so you know, I'm agitating for India's like independence right after I get out of the war. So fuck all y'all. And then she just made and she couldn't lie. As a Sufi mystic, like, you're not allowed to lie. It's like one of the tenets of the religion. And she became their greatest radio operator. Like, they rounded up all of the radio operators in Paris the second day she was there. She refused to be airlifted out, and instead, I think it was 5 months when the average lifespan was 6 weeks, and went out punching, kicking, fighting, was imprisoned. She made 2 escape attempts, nimbly running across the roof even though she was a klutz, fighting even though she was a pacifist, lying even though she was a Sufi. She gave up everything of herself. I don't know whether I could do that, but I can totally identify with her being kind of a klutzy weirdo. So yeah.
I have a question. So, once you moved on from Wikipedia, how did you do your research?
I read a lot. I read a lot. So I'd start with Google Books and just Google the term, and then figure out where everything was. Then all those books, I'd look in their bibliographies. Okay, where did you get it from? On and on and on until I was able to find the source, or as close to the source as I could get. I'd also look on JSTOR, see if anybody had done like theses or academic papers on it, and then I'd look on the web. Weirdly enough, I would look on like Tumblr and Blogger and whatnot just to get an idea of like where this person is situated in the popular consciousness and like what are the general ideas that are perpetuated about them at this time. So like I did an entry on Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, who is a Mexican nun, and there's a very common refrain that she was lesbian, which entirely possible, leading to probable, but you have to also situate it in sort of how the style of writing was at the time. It was super flowery and romantic, and it doesn't necessarily mean that. So I was like, it's tangential to her story. Like, I'll put a footnote in there, but that's about it. So like knowing that and at least being conversant with it is sort of the last part of the sort of opposition research. Is what I do. So yeah. And is there a question? Yeah.
Do you have a favorite? Like if you could bring one back to life and hang out with her? Or you had to write an entire book about one?
Entire book about
and still like her.
one? I don't know if you've read a lot of them. There's a lot of them that I wouldn't want to be in the same room as. Like, there are really some terrifying women in this book. I don't know. I think, honestly, Couteloon is kind of a... No, Couteloon and Julie d'Aubigny. Julie d'Aubigny de La Montpan. She was this bisexual sword-slinging opera singer who like burnt down a convent to bang a nun. Like, she was like real-life Bugs Bunny. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, she got into so many duels she had to be pardoned by the King of France twice. Like, she was pretty amazing. She would be. I'd like to hang out with her. I wouldn't want to live with her. I think she'd be a lot of fun to like have at a dinner party. But yeah, you'd have to batten down the hatches on that one. Yeah.
What was the hardest to write?
Fool on Devi is the last entry in the book for a reason. There's some really, really tough shit in that entry. That is not for kids. What is most terrifying about Fool on Devi is that she is one of the most recent figures in the entire book. She died in 2003. She was Bandit Queen of India, and the horrifying stuff that she went through, and knowing that it happened that recently and that it is not uncommon, that it is still going on, yeah, that was hard. So be careful when you start reading Fool on Devi's entry. It's at the back for a reason. Anything else? Anybody else? Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Hey.
Have you come across any candidate that was radioactive? You said, nope, not touching that one.
So my editor wanted me to do an entry on Hillary Clinton. I didn't. I like Clinton. I like her all right, but people bring too much shit to the table when it comes to her. And there's a number of other sort of more modern figures that are like that. Indira Gandhi, I think. Most people who don't know much about her would be like on her side, but a lot of my more woke, as the kids say, Indian friends hate her. They're like, never do an entry on. I will stop talking to you if you do an entry on Indira Gandhi. I'm like, okay, cool, good to know. Yeah. Any other questions? Read a chapter. Go ahead.
Did you decide to do the book kind of early on? Or were you just kind of doing the entries on the Tumblr and then someone approached you? Or kind of...
So the way the book happened was it went viral super early on. I started getting approached by agents, and I was like, cool, this would be a good book, right? And hopefully it can be open up doors to other stuff. Like I'd love to do animated shorts if at all possible, but my God, it's really hard to get the funding for that. There's no business model. But yeah, so they approached me, and then I was like, I don't know anything about agents. I need a lawyer to look over this. And then I got a lawyer, and she was like, oh, well, wow, your stuff is really cool. Here, let me set you up with real agents who are super cool. And I'm like, and the agents are like, yeah, we really like your stuff. Thanks, lawyer person. And from there it was to the races. There was actually a bidding war between a bunch of different publishers, and HarperCollins was the one who won.
Would you ever consider doing merchandise from the book? Like selling action figures of the pictures? Or like posters you can put on the wall?
So I do have a Redbubble store where you can get most of the posters. I have not been updating it in forever, and a bunch of the art like are very early versions that I redid for the book. So like this is one of them. Maria Trubetskaya is in her tank fighting girlfriend. Those of you who don't know, real quick, Maria Trubetskaya, Soviet Russian, husband was killed by the Nazis. She sells all their belongings, buys a tank, names the tank fighting girlfriend, and starts killing Nazis. It's a real human being. That actually happened. You can find pictures of her. So yeah. I need to do more on the Redbubble side. In terms of other stuff, if there is support for it, it's really, this is the first time I'm seeing like, okay, what will the idea support? Like, I don't want to bring in other people that aren't me into this unless I'm sure that they won't get burned. Like, it's okay for me to get burned because I'm just me. Like, I can make my own choice, but like, if I can't like pay someone, I'm not gonna take them on. Like I will not do that. And I don't know. Like it's hard enough just for myself making a living off of this. And I wouldn't want to. It's been really, really difficult, and I wouldn't want to suck someone else into that. And you'd have to if you're doing merchandise. So seeing what the actual, like, what you can actually get. Like, there's a lot of people like, oh yeah, I love your stuff, I'll like it online, but when it comes to actually paying money, there's a big question mark.
Yeah.
Turns out it's going all right. Thanks, Phil.
Just saying, I would totally buy an action figure of Tirga Cow.
All right. One of my good friends works in toys at Disney, and she's like, do you ever want to make toys? Yeah.
I have another question. After the NPR story, I went and Googled you, and I was like, well, I wonder where you went to art school. And I noticed that.
No, I didn't. I
How
have
did
a
you
degree in film criticism.
How did you learn how to do all that?
If you saw the early stuff, I sucked. Like, it was not good. I mean, it was okay. I mean, but looking at it now, I was like, man, eyeballs burning out of my sockets. And I'm still not great. Like, I worked with some of the greatest artists in the world for my entire adult life, pretty much. I know exactly, like, how far I have to go. Like, it's passable, like, but I can't hold a candle to some of these guys. Like, and I know it. So I've tried to compensate in other ways. Like, as opposed to having just the very flat, cartoony style, I've gone through and done, like, a lot of rendering on it and additional sort of lighting effects and whatnot to make it feel like it's a bit more, like, high-end, valuable sort of thing. Just because I didn't feel confident enough in my ability to draw sort of poses and like get away with just sort of the naturalistic stuff. There's people that are like storyboard artists who like work 10 times as fast as I do. Their work is always spot on, always on model, and like every time I draw it, it's like slightly off. Like it's like slightly different character. And I'm getting better, but you know, it's just you show up every day and you keep working at it. And it, you know, pencils down, move on. The best thing I ever did was set a thing of every Wednesday you have to update the website with a new entry. And since if you've seen the website, I switched. It's not the format in the book, which is sort of here's a picture and here's a bunch of text. I switched over to doing sort of full comic style entries, which have been great. They've been very popular online, and it's definitely pushed me, and I'm growing a lot, but they take way longer, so instead of 1 week, it's every 2 weeks or so, and right now everything's going crazy in my life, so hopefully I'll get another one out next week. Yeah, I'm working on it. So, what's up?
Did you like always like writing like stories and like did you always like care about like quality and like drawing and stuff, or like when did you
I got to care about it a lot more once people started saying I sucked. Once I started putting it online, people were like, "Oh God, if this is what DreamWorks artists can draw, like no wonder their movies are so crappy." And I'm like, I wasn't that sort of an artist. My coworkers are great. Don't judge them based off of me. Like I was a programmer. I don't know. I was cared. I came out to California to write. but I kind of took a very long detour getting to it, like 15 years. But I'm here now, so I've always been writing sort of in the side, but it's mostly been fiction stuff that will likely never see the light of day. But who knows? Maybe after this, I'm able to pull off some of that. That'd be cool. What's up?
Have you developed a good writing process?
No. I've developed a writing process. I don't know. For the comic stuff is a lot different. So what I'll end up doing with that is outlining how the story goes, and then because it's almost like you have to compose it in tweets. It's very little text on the page. It's almost like more like a poem, and so I go through a lot of different iterations, and also just sort of how the text flows on the page. So that's a very, I go through iteration of just working out the text before I even draw any like rough thumbs or anything. And then I, will show it to various friends, like, does this look all right? Does this make sense? And they're like, I don't really get this. I think you need to slow down here. And learning how to sort of pace it like a movie. In terms of writing for the book, basically, my writing process would be I'd take one of my roommates aside and be like, I gotta tell you this story. It's crazy. Let me tell you about Marguerite de la Roque. Ah! And in telling it, I would get better at telling it each time because my goal was always to sort of talk in my own voice. And it's funny, like there's a lot of really weird things for a 34-year-old man to be saying in this book. But that is actually how I talk a lot of the time. Like I will say, oh my God, they were besties. Which isn't the most dignified thing in the world, but I'm also not the most dignified human in the world. So yeah, I mean, in terms of these sorts of entries, it was a lot just figuring out how I would tell a story at a party. Yeah. Oh God, they keep coming. Hey.
So I was wondering, for each of the stories, do you try to have like an arc or their lives and do like acts and stuff like that, and have it resolved in like a feel-good way, or? Yeah,
I mean, obviously the template for these are movies. So I'll write out the general, like, I'm trying to figure out what the central theme, the central question of this person's life was, right? So like I did an entry on Isabella of France, which is very long, but after reading through all of it, it sort of felt to me that her life story was she had bought into this idea of like, this is, you act this way, this is what you get. Like, this is what it is to be a princess, and if you hold up your end of the bargain, the happiness awaits. And she held up her end of the bargain, and there was no happiness, and there was war, and it was horrible, and she was just, bad things happened. And so she said, screw it, flip a table, I'm doing it my way. And the whole thing sort of was this interesting referendum on how the Middle Ages and on to today sort of viewed women that were blemished. Like they literally put her through this whole like look in her mouth, like make sure her teeth were all right, like when they were looking to marry her off. And midway through her marriage, like around the time that she sort of turned flip table, she had gotten horribly burnt. Her tent had caught fire while she was staying by her husband's side. And so she was literally a blemished woman at that point. So I took this as a visual metaphor and like carried it through the story. So I try and have all that. And like she flamed out. She was just as screwed up as everybody around her in the end. Like by the time she finally got power, she was no better than anybody else. It's like climb a pile of poop to smell a rose and find out that you have no sense of smell anymore. And that was sort of her story. So I try and dig down to figure out what that story is and arc it around that.
And most of it is sort of like not a day in a life, but a life in a life.
Life in a life. Yeah.
What it was.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single entry I've done that's just like, here's one day from this person. Well, no, that's not true. Nirja Bano in this died in 1986 defending, she was a flight attendant who died defending a lot of people from a terrorist attack on Pan Am Flight 73, I want to say. I forget, yeah, I think it's 73 in Karachi.
So going back to the core concept of the project, blog, however you want to term it, is there any one you feel could be sanitized into being a Disney princess?
Oh yeah, a ton of them. Like especially towards the beginning of the book.
What would be your feelings if that happened towards the reality of?
It's just the inexorable like march of Disney. It's unstoppable. It's unstoppable. Like literally, they're like the most powerful media company in the world. I think. Like it'd be hard to. What you gonna do? I mean, my version and the original version always still live on. Yeah, it'd suck, but I don't know. Like Marco Polo had Cthulhu in it, who's one of the first entries, and in the history books, she's like this big, beefy, solid wrestler lady, and she's portrayed by someone who is like 95 pounds stick figure, which is a bummer. But there's tons of other depictions of her. It's fine. So, I should probably start signing soon, I'd imagine. Yeah. Hi, Olga.
Hi. Do you think that this book will ever get turned into curriculum, like classes, or would you welcome that? Have you made available, or would you make available additional research materials if that were to happen? Yeah.
Thanks, Olga. It already is curriculum. It's being taught at Central Michigan University in one of their classes. I flew out in February and got to talk to them. They used an early version of the book, and I put out a bounty for anybody who could come up with good corrections would get a signed copy of the book. There was one girl who like went in like every single chapter. She's like, "Here's the opposition research." I'm like, "You win. You win in a big way." Thank you. And then in terms of additional resources, I mean, there's so much stuff of this that didn't make the cut that's online. And like all the stuff that I'd mentioned earlier, like every reference image that I've ever done, time-lapse videos of me drawing everything, like everything I've ever done practically, every doodle I've ever done for every entry, both in the book and online, are part of usually they're Patreon rewards for people who like are backing in. Please, if you feel so inspired to like toss me a bit of change here and there, it definitely help because publishing is a very inconstant stream of revenue. But I put together something such that anybody who has a book gets a free month demo of that, and hopefully you'll look at it like, that's amazing. I would like to see more of this. So yeah. What's up?
If girls or if anyone's reading this now, or young women are reading it now, what type of modern rejected princesses would you want to, like what type of badass young chick now would?
I actually post on the website, I've got a whole section called Modern Worthies that are just like badass modern day ladies.
Or like young girls now, like what would you want this to inspire in them? Like what type of like hustle or badassdom or challenge?
I would like for everyone to not underestimate women, especially if the women are themselves.
That's awesome.
Thank you. I feel like I should probably start signing because I know some people had to leave early. So let me set up with that. And y'all like organize among yourselves, figure out who has to leave early and get them to the front of the line because I don't want to like keep them. Has anybody got like a really like crazy have to ask a question? No. Good.
Who are the women? Who are the women now?
I'm sorry?
All right, thank you all for being here. We do not keep crowds like this, so this is awesome. Jason's going to go to the back desk. He's going to sign back there. So we're going to run a line right down this way and back up this way. We'll give you Post-it notes. If you've not yet purchased a copy, you can do that at the register. Thanks.